is Dan O'Shea, a retired Navy SEAL commander and former coordinator for the hostage working group, American Embassy, Iraq. Dan, good morning, and so glad you could be with us today. Let's begin by talking about the current hostage situation. We don't know a lot. What does that tell you in terms of ongoing negotiations to secure the release of over 200 people held by Hamas?
Well, very positive development last week. American mother and daughter were released on Friday. And again, right now, these are the only bargaining chips Hamas has. So there's 200 plus hostages. I think the number last I heard this morning was it's now over 212 or 220. So we've got potentially 212 different hostage rescue missions being planned. We can't assume that all the hostages are held in the same place. They're certainly probably scattered around. And as we know, Gaza is one of the most densely packed density populations on the planet. 25 square miles, 5 miles wide, and 16,000 people per square mile. So it will be very challenging to find them. We can assume these hostages are being held potentially in the tunnel systems that we've heard about, but they could also be held in these apartment buildings that are now, as you can see from the footage, that are being struck by airstrikes from Israel.
As you mentioned, and we're looking at photos of them, those two women from the Chicago area, a mother and daughter, were released on Friday. What vital information would investigators be able to get from them about where the hostages are being held and the conditions under which they're being held?
Well, you can pretty much assume that the mother-daughter probably were blindfolded and probably don't have a whole lot of situational awareness of where they were located exactly, because obviously they're not from Gaza. There would be no common terrain features for them to use, and they were probably blindfolded and in hiding, and certainly just absolutely terrified. But there will be important things they can share. In particular, were they held with other hostages and how many, and what are the conditions they're being held in. So they will be going through not only medical checkups, but they'll be being debriefed to provide information on what the situation was for them, and their approximately week plus long captivity.
Dan, there have been some reports that Hamas at one point was willing to let women and children go, that they weren't quite sure what to do with all of these hostages, that perhaps they had taken too many. What is your sense of what Hamas's plans might be for them? Do you think that they have a firm idea of what next to do with these people that, as you say, are their prize bargaining chips?
Well, we're talking, this is the land where hostages have been held for years. So there's no telling what their plan is going to be. And obviously it's changing by the day. There's a lot of world opinion in the Arab world against the fact that they took so many women and children and grandparents and family members and children themselves, including infants. So they're going to play this out for all the propaganda. If it's going to serve their interests and aims to release the hostages, they will. We know that there's been, speculation that the Americans were released first. Is that there's tremendous pressure by U.S. officials to tell the IDF to slow roll the offensive. Don't go into Gaza, because obviously that's going to preempt any rescue attempts if there's a full scale armored and tank invasion and airstrike. So right now, every hostage, their nationality is going to be used against them or in their favor, and it's there's no telling what could happen next. There could be more hostages being released in the coming days, weeks, but that's not necessarily, there could be anything done. And they're looking at world opinion, and they're going to leverage these hostages to their advantage, however that's going to be. And it may include execution videos if the airstrikes by the Israeli Defense Forces continue.
Oh, you kind of touched on something I wanted to ask you about lastly, and that is whether or not a big rescue operation is still possible at this point. As you so rightly point out, there's something like 300 miles of underground tunnels. And then, of course, there is the looming ground invasion. Do you see a big, robust effort to be able to go in and grab some of these people?
It will be a daunting task. In my 20 plus years of following this specific industry and the hostage rescue scenarios, I mean, hostage rescue missions are no-fail missions. You have to bring all the hostages home alive safely. All the rescue forces come home, hopefully, not wounded. But the challenges in this scenario, I mean, we've pulled these amazing rescue missions off for the last 20 years. We have the best special operations hostage rescue force on the planet, but nowhere has there been a situation like Gaza. Again, I talked about the density of the population. There are no friendlies in Gaza. Critical to a hostage rescue mission is getting in stealthily, because you can assume these Hamas terrorists are literally standing over their hostages with an AK-47. As soon as they hear something, they're going to kill the hostage. So very daunting task. It will be very challenging. I know they're pulling out all stops, but nothing like Gaza, because we have no friendlies. We don't own the night. You can see that the terrain will be very challenging to insert, and a hostage rescue mission, if it happens, will indeed be a miracle if it can be pulled off successfully.